Welcome everyone to this Higher Education Library Technology free webinar, Rethinking Student Engagement with Library Resources, Collaboration, Annotation, and importantly, the librarian's role. As we said, the webinar is being recorded. You have been muted. Do use the Q&A and also use the Q&A. Some people are having some issues with the chat, so use the Q&A there. So we'll move on, and I'll just give myself a brief introduction. I'm Ken Chad. I founded Higher Educational Library Technology. It's great to have the people from Technology with Sage on dealing with this really, I think, important issue. So I've been running Higher Education Library Technology for more than the last decade or so. I run Ken Chad Consulting and have been predominantly working in higher education. So Georgia and Matthew, why don't you introduce yourselves now?
Thank you so much, Ken. I'm Georgia. I'm a product manager for Talis within Technology from Sage. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. And just a little bit of background about me is I've had about 7 years of teaching experience before I moved into product roles and specifically EdTech and library tech. So that's me. I'll pass over to you, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Georgia. And I'm Matthew. I'm also here from Technology from Sage. I come from a learning tech background within higher education. And among the things that I do here at Technology from Sage, one of the reasons I'm here today is that I kind of have that pedagogical background as well as having conducted some of our research and written our white papers, which I'm sure we will get on to talk about slightly later. But very excited to be here, very excited to see folks joining us from so many different places. So thank you all for coming along.
So just some short housekeeping. Actually, Tara, do you just want to take over the housekeeping side?
Yeah, of course. I'm Tara and I work in marketing at Technology from Sage. So yeah, if you can't hear, please rejoin the Zoom and select connect with computer audio. We have put here about connecting with each other in the chat. It seems like there is a slight issue, but please do use the Q&A box and get chatty there. If you have any questions at all, put them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them at the end. And when we get to the Q&A section, feel free to raise a hand to feel muted, and we can you can speak to us directly that way. And the session is being recorded, and you'll receive it after the webinar.
Okay. So there's a short. I'll do a short intro and set the scene, and then we're going to be looking at a demonstration of Talis Engage. We'll have some discussion, and then at the end some Q&A. So we'll get going fairly briskly through all this. So just in terms of setting the scene, I just want to say a few words, a few minutes. My journey with reading or resource list solutions began a long time ago in my pre-consulting days when I worked for a vendor of library software. And we lost a bid because we didn't have a reading list solution. Now that vendor was a US vendor, and they thought this was all about something they called course reserves, where you link specific items to a course, and in those days, physically put them in a separate course reserve section. So they didn't really get what reading lists as we understand them now were really about, where you link a title to a course and characterize it as recommended or essential and so on, and add a lot more functionality. Now, a couple of years later from that experience, I worked with a vendor that really did get reading lists. And in fact, they went on and developed what became the forerunner to Aspire. Now, since then, reading lists have become ubiquitous in UK higher education, and they're popular now in the US and elsewhere. And a few years ago, in 2018, I wrote a higher education library technology briefing paper, and then I suggested that reading resource list systems would have a major impact on global library technology, just as years before those library discovery services had done. But I also pointed out that I believed that they would play a role in what was called sometimes pedagogical scaffolding all around being student-centered learning. And I think that's a point we will pick up. So I now see reading lists as a really strategic solution that helps bridge the gap between librarians and academics, and in a wider sense, by blurring the boundaries between what we thought of as library technology and educational technology. And in fact, I think that's really important. I think it's an important component of this wider digital transformation agenda in higher education that's being advocated very strongly and supported in the UK by JISC. Now, all that's a good thing because it helps students. It adds also significant value to the role of librarians and can help raise their profile in the university as a whole, and not least in those terms of the digital transformation agenda I just mentioned. Reading lists clearly showed their value during COVID by helping students to get easy access to critical online resources for their courses. Now we're seeing a new phase of solutions to enable students to better engage, collaborate, annotate reading lists resources. So let's find out some more. Over to you.
Thank you, Ken. I can never find the unmute button. So I'm going to have a little chat with you guys today about some of the feedback that we've been hearing from our librarians, based on the discussion topic we're going to be talking about today and how we're looking to kind of help bridge that gap that we've been learning about. So some of the challenges that we know, as Ken has just touched upon, talking about how students are now needing to have access to resources from home, like for example, COVID, and a bunch of other reasons. So, you know, in the digital era of learning and personal study, our flagship product, Talis Aspire, provides core reading list management support and for libraries and their patrons. However, online learning and that flipped classroom space are becoming more commonplace as a key player in e-learning, as well as an access to wider variety of teaching resources, so that go far beyond physical resources, PDFs and web pages to what we've been used to. So we thought about how we can support our learners in that from our reading list. And the solution that we could come up with and what we think would really support this is Talis Engage, which is our new feature set that we have just released into Talis Aspire. And essentially what this is a new built-in digital reader with the social annotation features available directly within the reading list. And I'll show you that in a moment. But just a couple of key things. We feel like it will help drive engagement by having like the ability to transform that reading list into more of a teaching and learning tool as well with an interactive space. Enables collaboration. So your students and faculty can annotate materials together. So it's not just one person doing something on their own and then having the opportunity to come together. They're doing that at the same time in real time. Simplifies the access. So our students and academics already use reading lists and whether through the VLE or through our website. So they will be able to spot this very, very quickly. Resources are open directly within the reading list. And also supports compliance. We have the ability for our TADC customers to use copyright checking for books and journal articles too when it comes to this uploading. And faculty can upload PDFs, lecture slides, images, audio files and so much more, giving students streamlined access to all the content they need right where they need it. So I am going to quickly just swipe across my screen. I hope you can see the reading list there. If you can't, just let me know. But this is essentially our Talis Aspire reading list. And what we have here is a demo list that I've put together that shows some, like a typical list for what some academics could put together. And we're going to look at how those faculty members can upload their own resources that stand alongside the library resources available in the reading list. So here we have the Librarian Futures Part II. I know all of you have read it by now, and if not, you can find it on our website. And this is a document type, so that we really want to upload this. I have downloaded this and I want my students to be able to access this material, read it, and let's have a discussion on it. So I'm going to go over here onto the reading list item, the three dots, and click upload a file. I get this modal here and have the option to browse some files. And I can pick the librarian student's PDF that I'd like to open and click open. And while that uploads, I'm going to talk to you about some of these options underneath here. The point of having the ability to annotate here would also be not just class commenting, but personal commenting. So you might find that as an academic, you don't want your students to be able to communicate to each other on the document straight away. You might want it to be for personal studies, so you can turn class commenting on or off. And you can also allow users to download this resource that you've provided them for offline study. But you might decide that that's not the case if you have a sensitive document or something that is not able to be downloaded because you don't have the rights for that. And you can check those boxes here. And also when you get into Engage, you can also configure those settings. So I'm going to click Submit here. And my upload has been successful. So with a little bit of a refresh of my page, we should now see the View Online button. So that said View Availability, so you could see whether it was in your library holdings, but now it says View Online. And when you click through to that, you will now be opened up into our Talis Engage reader, which is super, super exciting. So let's have a look at what you can do with this reader. So as you can see, you've got the Librarian Futures report. You can highlight bits of the report and leave a comment. This is really great for academics if they want to pre-add any questions that they want to fill in and they want to, do some work beforehand. So when your students go into the document, they can answer questions. You can agree with different people that you see and also reply to them as well. And if I go down a little bit further up, you can see all of my comments. We have some people right now who are also in my class, Matthew Weldon, adding comments. So you can see in real time, people are adding comments and they're available to you. So this is a really collaborative social area here where everyone can add things and share their insights. And you can also, which is really, really useful for those students who are feeling a little bit shy to share their thoughts, you can reply anonymously too. So that's really, really useful when it comes to the class comments. And also we have the personal notes section here where you can leave your own notes that anybody else can't see. They're just for you. So they are privated notes. And you might want to say, things like, oh, I'll come back to this. And this is really important. I need to study more. And you can have all of those notes there for you and no one else can see those. Now, just a little bit on the sides here, you can have the search bar where you can look, oh, I can't spell today, where you can look to see, search for certain keywords and then get taken to those keywords directly in the document that you've provided. You can also go through the table of contents and jump straight to certain areas, as well as navigate through pages. So this might be the page I want to have a look at, previous and the next page. And if there's just too much going on here, you can also hide your annotation. So you've just got pure reading. So there's lots of different configurable settings that you can have here, which is super exciting. And one of the most exciting things that we have included here is the ability to configure the settings I spoke to you about earlier when it comes to downloading the document and also turning class commenting off. So if you are an academic and you decide, right, I don't want class commenting on anymore, I want to turn this off, I can click save. And then when the class comments comes back and we go to the top, you can see that the class comments aren't available for you anymore and they're not able to be seen. So you might only have those open for a certain time for a discussion piece. And you can still personally comment, but you might also decide that I don't want to have the ability to download the resource anymore. So when you go to here and you change the resource ability to download and click resource, you'll no longer be able to download that as well. So these settings are configurable and changeable, which are really, really exciting. So there's so much that you can do here, and it's lovely that you can kind of have that classroom feel while also being outside of the classroom asynchronously working on a project together. Now I'm going to go back here to my reading list, and that's all well and good. That was a document type, very, very nice. But I think I'd like to upload a different type of file. So for this particular resource type, it's an image. So I'm going to find an image that I want for my history class to look at, a primary source. So I'm going to click that and I'm going to open my image. So we support JPEG as well. I'm going to click submit and I'm going to refresh that page. My View Online button is now there, which shows that there is a document attached, and you have images supported as well, where you can drop a pin and leave a comment, or you can highlight as well, just as you did before within your PDF too. We also support things like Word documents and audio files as well. There's a bunch of different things that we support. But I think that gives us just a very brief overview of what Engage can do. And I think something that's also key to look at is how this affects the different patrons that are in your library and also in your universities. So for the libraries, we have centralized management of content, so everything can be in one place. Copyright compliance, as I mentioned before. So you have the books and journal articles. If you are part of our TADC subscription package, you can have those to be copyright cleared for you before they're able to be uploaded. And also increased engagement. We can see how this can really bring students, academics, and librarians into the reading list all in one place. For faculty, streamlined resource sharing. So it doesn't just have to be what's available in the library. It could be OA resources and personal content like lecture notes, interactive teaching. So really being able to have that social annotation come to life, spark discussions, and support active learning in different ways than traditional in-person teaching, and simplifies access. So your students already have access to the reading list if you have that as part of your library, and they'll be able to access all of these through their VLA or the website as well. And for students, same sort of thing, a streamlined access, digital resources open directly in the reading list, so you don't have to go off to Google and find other things. Collaborative learning, sometimes we do our best work. What I found as a teacher, we do our best work when we work together. So having that in real time, sharing notes, questions, insights can be super helpful on the reading list. And everything kind of stays attached to the document so you don't forget where things are. And comments are there when you return, and focus study. So being able to have a structured reading list to prioritize what matters most, which is their resources and where they can get them. So that was just kind of like a whistle-stop tour from me. But I wanted to share that with you because I think it's so valuable with the discussion that we're having today. And thank you for letting me show you guys. I hope that's been very, very helpful to you. But yeah, over to you, Ken.
Yes, thank you. That was really interesting. And what it's put into my mind is that word that we, perhaps in libraries, hear less about, but certainly educational technology and academics talk about the flipped classroom. And I think it's really interesting, Georgia, to hear from your very real experience of teaching, how that collaboration and engagement really does matter. So can you talk a little bit more about that, and perhaps Matthew here too, from your own experience and how this changes things?
I think in terms of, that flipped classroom learning and having spaces where that are not traditional learning spaces now are becoming more and more the norm. I think when we look maybe pre-COVID at what teaching was like, I know from my degree that we were never taught on how to, teach online. So being able to have setups that are give you that flexibility of being able to do different techniques that you would love to do in the classroom, like group work and peer discussion and sharing things rather than just here's a resource and, go off and do your own study, is really, really important to still have. That's where some of the best, what I believe and what I've seen in my career is where some of the best learning comes into play. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Matthew.
I was just gonna, yeah, I mean, I agree with that completely. I was just going to add that, when I was a student, this is just from personal experience. When I was a student, everything was very didactic, and that I don't really remember there being a sort of flipped classroom approach in place, but what I used to do was essentially try and emulate that as best I possibly could for myself. So I would, um, I would go to the class, wouldn't really absorb anything because I'd be going, I don't really understand this and I'm not taking it in right now. Then I would go away and do the reading, as was the way that was meant to be done. And then I would go, all right, okay, now I can sort of try and recontextualize that conversation, that discussion that we had for myself. So it was essentially trying to do the same thing, but doing it in a much more roundabout, much more difficult way. So it's nice to see that, yeah, flipped classroom seems to be a much more cemented kind of tactic now. I think what we've certainly seen from the past, because we've been working, Georgia and I in particular have been working with social annotation features for quite a few years at this point. What we've heard from uh, folks who use it is that their students really like it. They really like to be able to read something and talk about it before they get into the classroom. And that actually, when they're in the classroom, having already had that discussion, having already had that conversation, and being able to clarify misunderstandings, be able to have that additional context, it actually makes the in-person discussions that they're having so much more substantive, and they're getting so much more out of the contact time that they have with their teachers. And that goes for scholarly resources, it goes for, journal articles. It also goes for things like the course syllabus. If someone has uploaded the course syllabus and they've annotated that together, they've co-constructed an understanding of what's expected of them on that course, and they're able to have a much fuller and much deeper understanding of what's expected to them. So I think it's great that I know that we are really excited about being able to facilitate that flipped classroom approach, and we're particularly excited about being able to do it within the same platform that we're already working with, making Engage available for all of our Talis customers who might want to experiment with that sort of thing. It is available for them now, so we're definitely very excited about it.
Yeah, you've covered a great load of issues there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a little poll to try and encourage some structured, if you like, input from everybody. I'll set that going. And in the meantime, so people should be able to see the poll and ask some questions, generally about reading list management and discovery resources, so on. And that will run and provide some background and I think some context. But what I wanted to do while we're doing that is just talk to something that I think is close to my heart, and that's something I touched on, and it's the librarian's role in teaching and learning. That my early days of engagement with the reading lists, it was one of the first, if you like, library solutions that really helped librarians engage with academics, encouraging them to do their reading lists and so on. So how's that changing now? You've touched on that a little bit, but can you say a bit more about that library role in teaching and learning and how it's changing? And in my mind is the opportunity, I suppose I mentioned in my session about this. This is digital transformation we're talking about, and that's an agenda that's capturing university minds at the moment. So I wonder if you could either George or kick off on that, or Matthew, however you feel.
I'm happy to come in on that, Georgia, if you're
Go for it.
it's okay with you. Yeah, I think so. Georgia's already mentioned Librarian Futures during her presentation and uploaded it to Engage. One of the things that we are very passionate about doing is doing the work, doing the research to kind of understand what's happening in academic libraries at the moment globally, and also making that research freely available. So there are 4 reports now. Each one of them is available to download freely on our website. I won't plug it anymore, I promise. But I wanted to mention that because it's important in terms of how we collect this information and how we stay abreast of how things are changing. I think the thing is, the library's role in teaching and learning is probably too big to fit in a single answer, and it's probably too big to fit in a single webinar. I would just keep talking and then everybody would have to go eventually. But what I would what I would say is that I'm sure that the librarians that we have on the call today, each of you would kind of you would all be able to identify shared roles and shared jobs that you have within your institution. And then I'm sure that everyone would also have very unique and very particular ones at your institution. So it would be difficult to pin down uh, an exact definition. But I think the thing that we've found is that the stereotype of the library being a building with books in it isn't really fit for purpose anymore. That's not what the library is. It's not what the library does. The library offers so much more than that, so many more services, and librarians themselves offer so much expertise that they can feed into really every aspect of learning and teaching. So yes, they are providing access to resources, but they're also supporting effective engagement with those resources. They're offering tailored guidance to students when and where they need it. They're supporting the development of research and communication skills. And that's just a few of the different ways that they feed into student success and digital transformation, that sort of thing. Another large role of that is, yes, they are supporting students directly, but the library also has a huge role to play in supporting academics and supporting researchers, which I think often kind of, as we quite rightly focus on students, can also be overlooked. And that's maybe a second order way that they are supporting students, by supporting the people who are also teaching those students. I think one of the real challenges that we've picked up on in the research that we've done is that it's difficult to communicate the full range of services and the full range of support that is available through the academic library. And we see that recognised. So that in part 3 of the report, which we focused on librarian skills, we found that the skills, or some of the skills that librarians feel most passionately about developing in the short and long term, are skills around academic and student outreach. So just getting that message across to folks that, here is everything that we have available. And I know, Ken, that we talked about that recently when we did the Librarian Futures virtual summit. We had some librarians come along, and we chatted about the ways in which the library can make themselves more visible. And the last thing that I'll say before I stop talking is that you mentioned how is the library's role in learning and teaching changing. It's changing even now as we speak. I think it's constantly in flux, it feels like, at the moment. And a lot of those changes are being driven by sort of external motivators. So things like budget challenges, and we're on a webinar in 2025, so I've got to mention AI. That's what everybody does these days. But AI is forcing people to change. It's necessitating that change. And we see librarians supporting the students in dealing with both of those challenges. We see different libraries embracing open access and open educational resources to support student success, even in times of financial challenge or financial crisis. And in our report as well, our most recent report on the library and AI, we talk about how librarians, with the full range of skills that are available to them, really are kind of the natural people within the institution to pick up and lead on AI. And that doesn't necessarily mean buying AI. That doesn't necessarily mean that the library suddenly has to find lots of money to pay for AI, but leading in that sense of, here's how you engage with it responsibly, here's what you have to watch out for, here's how to use it effectively if you are going to use it. So all of that to say, the library's got a huge amount of stuff to do with learning and teaching. It's an indispensable component of that, and its role is changing all the time. I'm sure I don't need to tell the librarians on the call that, but that, to my mind, is a kind of potted summary of how important the library is in that regard.
That's interesting, and I'm with that. But one of the issues I see, and it cuts across other things, as you say, into research, doing some work on that at the moment, is that, as you found in the report, librarians are trusted, but they're not always approached. And certainly from the institutional point of view, when I've just recently been working on a project, the senior university staff didn't invite the library initially to their discussions around digital transformation. And when I've talked to people coming into the industry, library vendors, they said, librarians, it's quite understand, they're so terrible at marketing themselves. Yeah, so there's an appreciation, but do you think there's more, and how can that be done to really get the the profile, if you like, of libraries up the agenda, because all this fantastic stuff is going on, but it's not always getting as appreciated as it should be at the very top of the institution. And I remember a long time ago working with some early people who were implementing reading lists, and they said the best implementations are when we got a really strategic level of support to implement these solutions. I wonder if you've got any thoughts there.
I mean, we've spoken to so many libraries who have spoken about such in-depth training they go through to implement the reading list systems with their faculty and make sure that they're really, really supported. And like you said, those are the partnerships where you see the best outcomes with the reading list. And I think some people have even encouraged, some librarians have encouraged their faculty to create reading lists, training their students how to use reading lists and actually be able to use the tool to show them how to do that. And I think once that's like that trust is embedded and the library becomes visible in these sorts of resources that they have access to, I think sometimes there is from a student's perspective, the idea that the faculty runs this, like their specific lecturer runs this and they'll have all the answers, when actually that's not necessarily the case. It's usually, like we say with the reading list management system, come from our librarians, and they're the ones who are the experts on it. And when we have all three groups working together, not necessarily all at the same time, but interchangeably, the librarians working with the faculty working with the students working with the librarians to really understand what they do on a day-to-day basis and how they can help. Matthew touched on so many skills that they are able to provide and are just indispensable to our institutions. I think that visibility is so, so important. Yeah.
I'm just going to share the results of the poll, and maybe this will encourage some more discussion. But I don't know if that's people can see that.
Yeah, it's interesting that question number 2, the biggest disconnect that people have flagged there is that student awareness of library tools. So it's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I think one of our philosophies I think that we try and adopt whenever we're designing stuff like this is or implementing things like this is that student habits and student behavior is very difficult to change. And again, I am certain that I'm not saying anything that's particularly mind-blowing or particularly new to most of the folks on the call, but it's very difficult. For example, again, as a student many, many years ago, I remember being told, don't use Wikipedia. Do not use Wikipedia. It is bad for you. And I used Wikipedia because it was easy. Because it was easy and it was easily digestible and it was easy to understand. And one of the things that we try and empower librarians to do with a different tool that we have called Lean Library is to bring their library to Wikipedia, to insert their library into Wikipedia using that tool, so that when students use it, when students follow the same habits that they always do, their library is there waiting for them. So for us, that kind of guiding philosophy is bringing the library and its services and its collections to the places where students are already going, rather than trying to change their habits and get them to come away from these things. So that's one way of doing it. I think also it's always really beneficial when there are those really strong relationships between librarians and faculty or academics. That can make all the difference on a course whenever you're being taught, and you're constantly being reminded by the academic. And if you go to your librarian and ask about this, or if you speak to such and such, that can be a really powerful way, because they're getting so much contact time with students that they're in a really good position to advocate for the library and advocate for the services that are on offer. Oh, you're muted, Ken. You're on mute, Ken.
I'm going to pick up some questions from the Q&A that I think touches to this and relates to some of the things we said before. And in particular, this thing I mentioned about the merging or whatever we call it between educational technology and library technology. And in 2000, the librarian at up in St Andrews mentioned that there was that division, that there was library resources in the library catalogue and learning resources in the learning management system, or the VLE. And as you showed, Georgie, we've got this ability to, as you say, pull in lecture notes, but there's still that version. And one of the questions was, the IT department see this crossover, but they're confused about where do they put lecture notes now, or so that curation, students see resources, don't they? And in a way, we've organizationally set things up maybe in a sort of slightly siloed way. And what I'm seeing is that I think you guys are starting to break down those barriers, but I wonder if you've got any thoughts on that, and how we might talk to that IT person about how this confusion about where things should be uploaded should be dealt with.
I think two things can exist at the same time, right? And I think some of the things that we need to remember is, functionality has existed in different tools way before we started doing this. And it's something that we're really passionate about bringing as part of our subscription package at no extra cost to our users, because we have that functionality and that resource that we've used before. I mean, it's no secret that we have, our Talis Elevate product, and we've been able to utilize some of that fantastic software to be able to bring this functionality into our Aspire. And for those who don't use VLE, it's also really important to have. And for those that do use a VLE, we can provide that copyright check if you're part of a TADC, and have the books and journal articles be copyright cleared if that's something that you're interested in. And also there's configurable settings. So something I didn't show in our particular demo was that you can have a variety of different upload availabilities. So for example, you can just have uploads to books and journal articles only. So no images or anything like that, image resource types and things like that could be uploaded to, and they all have to go through a copyright clearance. You could have no copyright clearance needed, and you can upload, for example, to books and journal articles that don't have an ISBN or DOI if you want to use more OA resources and things like that. So we're trying to give people different flexibility, but also at the heart have the librarians be able to see what's going on and make informed decisions. We've heard a lot about the worry of not knowing what's been uploaded, in previous things within VLEs and other such resources. So, to be able to all of us bring more resources to the students in a way where they're already going to be able to access either the VLE or the reading list is only ever going to be a good thing in this digital learning environment, as it becomes more and more prevalent that that's where learning is moving towards digitally.
Yeah, just for you, Matthew, I was 2 weeks ago, I was at a major university in the UK, and the lecturer was saying, oh, I just stick my PDFs on, upload my resources to the reading list. And then I got the librarian saying, but there is this copyright thing, and I think they appreciated that, if you like, little tap on the shoulder, that means that they're not doing anything non-compliant, if you like, and compliance is a big issue. So he admitted he was being a bit cavalier, but he did appreciate that librarian tap on the shoulder to say, be careful about some of this stuff. Matthew.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on the same point that Georgia had come in on as well, to say I think the last line in that question as well, around how do you see both coexisting, is a really good one. And George has touched on that there, that the two things can coexist at the same time. We can have more than one tool, and that those social annotation platforms are already out there, and this is essentially our aim here, is to bring two different things together so that there's less scattered about. But one of the other things that I would add is that I don't think it's our intention that suddenly, now that this is available, that everything on the reading list is annotatable. Becomes, I'm not sure if that's a word. I keep using it, but I'm not sure if it's actually a word. But the intention is not to get to the point where everything is being uploaded and annotated all the time. What I would generally encourage when I'm talking to folks is to have quite a strategic use of it. It might be that you run one tutorial session a week, and that before students turn up to that tutorial, you want them to have done the reading and have asked any questions so that you can have a really substantive conversation in the room. And it might be that that's just what you upload to Engage every week. I think the thing as well about the conversation that's on offer through social annotation is that it's very contextual. So it's very specific to that resource, because obviously the conversation lives in the margin of the document or the whatever it is that you've uploaded. That might not be appropriate for conversations around upcoming coursework, for example, or just a reminder, bring your lab coat along to Thursday's session. That can all still very much live on the discussion forum on the VLE. So it's not intended necessarily to be a replacement for any of that. It's a complement to it. It's making the conversations that benefit from being contextual better, and making sure that the forums are used in kind of the way that is useful for forums to be used. So that would be also something that I would suggest, is that actually there's a place for both, and it's just about what conversation lives best where.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, we're always a bit wary of the all-encompassing solution, that there does need to be different approaches, and perhaps that's dealt with best in a more a policy way rather than a technology way. And so we're close to the end, and it sort of leads on to some of the things you've been saying, but it really comes back to this question of engage. And have you got any evidence about how people are engaging with Engage? Yeah, it's early days, but and I think, that perennial problem is also mentioned in another question. Great resources, but it's still hard getting academics to use that reading list functionality. So we've still got this engagement issue. I know you've talked through it a little bit, but any kind of snappy views on how we can better address that, with bearing in mind what you just said, Matthew, about there
So
being multiple places?
yeah, I mean, in terms of Engage specifically, we've been live for only a short amount of time, and we've had a really fantastic uptake of our institutions wanting to turn this on. So this has to be something that you request for us to turn on for you initially, and then you have the flexibility to turn on or off for your institution depending on how you see it working. So we've been able to trial quite a few of our universities. With a small group of librarians, have a go at it first to see how they're enjoying. We've actually just had a couple of universities ask to us to roll it out university wide after their trials, which is really, really
Right.
encouraging. We're really, really happy about that. And I think it's going to come with time, because it's such a change to what Talis Aspire initially was all about in terms of reading list management systems. And now we're moving into that teaching and learning space. So I think we've got a good chance over the summer for our librarians to have a trial with it, and then hopefully start using it properly from our September term, our new terms when those kick off around the world. And we look forward to seeing how this can be used alongside our reading list system, and just really start to see the reading list turn into an interactive learning space as well.
We're about on time. Any final comments from you, Matthew, before we wrap
No,
up?
I think I was just gonna say that yeah, we can, if you're sitting there and you have access to Talis and you would like to give it a go, you can get in touch with us via the normal channels, and we'll be very happy to set it up. We can set it up so that it's only yourself and a colleague that have access to it, so there's no there's no pressure to do this big rollout right away. You can just have a play around with it. So very welcome to do that. And yeah, if you are here and you don't have Talis but you'd like to talk about it, then we'd be very happy to hear from you.
Okay. Well, look, thanks, Georgia. Thanks, Matthew. This has been really interesting. It's certainly an issue close to my heart. I know there's lots of interest here, and I think that fundamental point that you've addressed, I think, so well, and in getting librarians engaged with these kind of solutions is really encouraging.